Cape Cod Broadcasting weaves the listening environments of 99.9 WQRC, Ocean 104.7, WFCC Classical 107.5, Cape Country 104, and CapeCon.com's website experience to reflect the lifestyles of the people who live, work, and play on Cape Cod. We hope that you enjoy this podcast.
Welcome into the Sunday Journal. I'm your host, Matt Pitta. Thanks for being with us today. We get together each week to talk about issues facing Cape Cod, the islands, and all of southeastern Massachusetts. Welcome into the program today. We are talking about the Housing with Love walk that begins on Monday, July 13th, and finishes in Falmouth on Sunday, July 19th. This is a cross-Cape trek that has been going on now for many years, all started by our longtime friend and very well-missed leader of this event, Bob Murray. It is now called the Bob Murray Housing with Love walk, which begins in Provincetown and then will finish up in Falmouth on Sunday, July 19th. This walk, of course, benefiting nonprofit housing organizations around Cape Cod that work on various housing issues. And today on the Sunday Journal, we're going to talk about the event. We'd like to welcome in several members of the organization that are involved with this. First of all, one of the volunteers who I met a couple of years ago, Don Jenkins. And Don, it's good to see you back here in studio. Thanks so much for being with me today.
It's great to be here. Thanks, man.
To, of course, honor the memory of Bob, our departed friend Bob Murray, who passed away, but the legacy of the walk continues, which is
Absolutely.
Great to know.
That's right.
Thanks so much for being here. Caroline Corgan is the manager at Homeless Not Hopeless. Caroline, thanks so much for being here today. Appreciate you stopping by. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
And also joining us is Tom Lacey. Tom is the director of the Falmouth Housing Corporation. And Tom, of course, there was a long legacy of Bob Murray over in Falmouth.
That's right. It's good to be here. The director of just quick correction, I'm the director of the Falmouth Housing Authority, but I'm on the board of the Housing Corporation.
I apologize about that. Thank you. Welcome into all of you here for our edition of the Sunday Journal. Don, I'm going to start with you. Give me, if you will, a little bit of an overview. Give us sketch out the big picture for us of what the Housing with Love walk is all about.
Okay. So Bob Murray started about 23 years ago when he moved to the Cape. He was tireless, has always been tireless in his efforts to help people who need help to keep a roof over their heads, most of whom are working families, many of whom are single moms. Personally was responsible for 4 affordable housing complexes and both of the food pantries on the Cape. Bob started walking 23 years ago, actually from Falmouth to Provincetown. I don't know when it started switching the other way.
I'll tell you a little bit about that, actually.
Okay.
Because having a lot of history with Bob and having been involved with it and covering this walk for over 20 years, the first year they did it, they didn't really think through the terrain of the walk. And as they got to the end of the walk that first year, they had to go up the hill in Truro, that long, long hill in Truro before they went downhill in Provincetown. And Bob always used to tell me, they said, from this point on, we're going the other way. We're going to go from Provincetown to Falmouth because the hills are a little bit easier. So that's how that all came about.
So Bob would always walk the entire distance. Not many folks do the entire distance. Actually, Tom Lacey, who's here with us, did the entire distance last year in honor of Bob. There are 11 agencies that are involved in affordable housing or homeless prevention that collaborate on this walk and also collaborate in many other services that they deliver across the Cape. Falmouth Housing Corp, Homeless Not Hopeless are 2 of those. And they take turns managing different segments of the walk according to which part of town they're in. And they provide support cars and people don their yellow shirts and they walk for homeless prevention, and it's primarily is a fundraiser. In the last several years, it's averaged in the $220,000 to $250,000 per year fundraising. Very successful and very important because homeless prevention is not heavily funded by the state. Most of the state's funding goes to homeless services, which is important. And so these agencies rely very heavily on private donation. And so that's why this walk is so important.
And so the way it works is you have these 11 agencies that all walk together. So it's kind of, the walk itself is an umbrella, if you will, for all of these organizations, these 11 groups that get together, and they all provide their own volunteers and their walkers, and you all walk together as one big group with the Housing with Love walk, and the money raised, again, gets divided up between all those organizations.
Right. Each individual organization raises money through sponsorship. And also there are organizations like St. Vincent de Paul and Council of Churches who actually contribute a significant amount and provide walkers, and that money is spread across all 11 agencies.
Mm-hmm. Let's bring in other folks to our conversation. Caroline Corgan is the manager at Homeless Not Hopeless. And Caroline, again, thanks for being here today. Tell me a little bit about Homeless Not Hopeless. Homeless Not Hopeless.
Homeless Not Hopeless is a nonprofit organization that was started in 2007, 3 years before Obama came up with the first comprehensive plan to end homelessness. It's currently comprised of 4 houses. It's a transitional housing program. It's a hand up, not a hand out. So if you are homeless, you apply to Homeless Not Hopeless. And you can live there up to a year, but we found that people stay longer because of the wait for housing. 2 of the houses hold women. There's a total of 48 people that the program holds, and then 2 of the other houses hold men. And we ask that you work, volunteer, or go to school, and it's an opportunity to put your life back together again. And all of the houses are managed by formerly homeless people. So we think it works, and we're pretty proud of it.
So you're one of the 11 organizations that will be walking this year, right?
That's correct.
Talk about your plan. What's the strategy for Homeless Not Helpless?
Lori Sexton, who is a former resident of one of our homes and now is currently a board member, is walking for us. So she's our celebrity walker, and we're very proud of her for doing this. So we'll be standing out there with oranges for her.
Now, how long has your organization been involved with the Housing with Love Walk? Is this your first year, or have you been involved in the past?
No, they've been involved, I think, for at least 5 years.
Several years now.
Yeah. So
Carolyn, in terms of, as you know, Dawn has some history with this. Myself, having known Bob Murray for a long time, I'm sure you've learned a lot about the history of this walk and how important it is. Talk to me, if you would, about that aspect of it, and why people continue to do this, not only for the good work they do, but for the legacy of Bob Murray.
I think once you become involved in helping the homeless, it's something that you can't really leave because it's very rewarding, especially, from my end, I see the change in a person. Once they have a roof over their head, they're more likely to succeed. It's very difficult to work, go to school, or put your life back together again when you don't have a roof over your head. So I think the people who do it are also on the side involved with the homeless, and they understand how rewarding it can be. It's a cause that's a very worthy cause.
Let's bring Tom back into the conversation. Tom Lacey with the Falmouth Housing Corporation. And Tom, as I said, you have some history there in Falmouth, and Bob, of course, had a big footprint when he was in Falmouth with the Housing Authority and Housing Corp. So talk to me about what you folks will be doing this year and your involvement with the walk.
We help coordinate drivers and support on when the walk gets up to that part of the Cape. We'll be walking to raise money for the Falmouth Homeless Prevention Fund that Bob created. I think this walk to me is really a legacy and a testament to Bob because it's really an example of how I think on the Cape we do things a little differently. And when you have 11 agencies that are all really sort of in the same business, you could have to help the homeless, and you're all can often be going for the same funding and so forth. In other places, I think it can get territorial, but around here, this is a collaboration, and so people can support this walk and know, every dollar is going to go as far as it can possibly go because each organization really has their niche for helping this issue here on the Cape.
Let's talk a little bit about this issue of prevention. I'll stay with you, Tom, but Caroline and Dawn, jump in whenever you want to here. The issue of prevention, I know many, many years ago when the housing issue was first being discussed, some of the focus was mostly on sheltering, things like that, but a lot of the transition over the past couple of years has been, okay, we have to take care of the people who need the shelter, but let's get to people before they end up in the shelter. Let's work on the prevention issues. You're right on the front line there in Falmouth, Tom, with the Housing Authority and with the trust, with the Housing Corp as well. So talk to me, if you would, about how important that prevention aspect has become over the past couple of years.
Homelessness is certainly one of those issues that is very visible, can be very visible when people are homeless, because whether they're on the street, living in their car, at a shelter, but what's invisible is the number of people here on the Cape that are at risk of homelessness. And with our seasonal economy, with unexpected medical or car repairs or that kind of thing, all it takes is one significant bill that can really spiral a family into homelessness. And so the prevention aspect is so key, because when somebody can get that one-time help to pay that bill, then they can keep up with their rent, and they're not starting to get hit by late charges from every single place that they owe money. They can keep up with all their bills, and so that prevention piece is so cost effective in terms of helping people retain their housing and avoid homelessness in the first place.
Tom, you bring up a good point, and some people may not realize this, but again, people who have been in this situation know that this is true. One big unexpected bill can completely upset the apple cart for a family, and they then have to make the decision: rent, fix the car so we can go to work, pay the electric bill, right? I mean, just one unexpected bill can really impact somebody here.
Absolutely, and so a lot of the funding that's raised from this walk can go towards helping people with those situations, and therefore keeping them from reaching the point of homelessness.
I know.
Good
Bob,
example.
Don, yes, please.
Dive in. There's so many stories like this one. There's a young woman, single mom, and a very high percentage of the folks living at or below the poverty level around here are single moms with children. And she was working in a restaurant, and her child was sick, so she had to go to Boston, and her child was in Boston for a long time, and so she was in Boston quite a bit. And to the credit, the restaurant kept her job. They gave her as many shifts as she could make, but that still wasn't enough. And so without the help of Housing Assistance Corp in this case, she wouldn't have been able to stay in her apartment. But typically that's about a $1,500, the average intervention, if you want to call it that, is $1,500 to get a car fixed or get a monthly rent paid. The cost of a family becoming homeless, they're going to spend months and months in shelters. It's probably $25,000 to $50,000, so it's very cost effective, not to mention the human cost. And there are just so many stories of single moms that their child is sick, they miss shifts, there's no choice, they have to choose to be home with the child. There's no alternative.
It is a win-win, as you're pointing out, Don, because if the family ends up in the shelter or they end up being split up, the cost just goes up exponentially. Yeah. Where if you can just come forward with a much smaller amount of money and the prevention, not only does it keep the family unit together, they probably keep working, etc. It just makes a whole lot more sense, the whole prevention aspect of it. Caroline Corgan is the manager at Homeless Not Hopeless. Caroline, your thoughts on this, the issue of trying to get to people before they end up in that homeless situation, and how that can really be a big factor.
I think a couple of things. I like the Housing First vouchers, and of course you have to have a history of homelessness, but that prevents the person from going back to the shelter, so they can live in our transitional houses under a Housing First voucher and not be in trouble and get ahead by working and saving. The problem is the minimum wage, which opens a whole other can of worms. The wages are so low on Cape Cod compared to the rest of Massachusetts. I think it's 33% below. And the housing is so high. So if the person, say, starts to get ahead and gets in the $21,000 range, now they are in the affordable housing range. They're no longer in the 30% bracket. So they get their apartment, one bedroom, $800 and something. That's affordable housing. And if anything happens, they are in big trouble. And it isn't going to be 30% of their income. It's going to stay in that $800 range. So if anything happens, they're back in trouble again. So it's something to think about, that massive gap between the minimum wage and the housing on Cape Cod.
There is a big disconnect down here, as you said, with the cost of housing, which is higher than the rest of the state, and the wages, which are lower than the rest of the state. So you have this widening gap, which is why an event like this is so important, because these 11 agencies that are involved, including yours, are going to be involved in using that money. And I would imagine basically that money is almost like a pass-through. The money that you raise is going to go right to the people that you're assisting.
That's right. Yeah.
Don, let's talk about how people can get involved. So what's going to happen, again, for the listeners, if you're just joining us, we're talking about the Bob Murray Housing with Love Walk that begins on Monday. And what color are the T-shirts? They yellow?
Yellow.
Okay.
Do you have the website name?
And you'll be walking from Provincetown to Falmouth beginning on Monday. And this is across
on Monday.
Across Cape Trek, as I call it.
Right.
So how can people get involved?
Okay, so first of all, a few people will walk the whole distance, like Tom did last year, but generally that's not what's happening. Yeah. You can show up at 8 a.m. on any of the days, and you can get the itinerary from the website. So the name of the website is murrayhousingwalk.org. Name for Bob Murray. So murrayhousingwalk.org, or just Google the Housing with Love Walk, and you'll find an itinerary. So on Monday we'll start in Provincetown, on Tuesday we'll start in Eastham, on Wednesday we'll start in Chatham, and then we'll end in Falmouth and Woods Hole. And so depending on where you are, it would be wonderful to come and walk half the day, come at the lunchtime and meet some of the walkers and hear some of their stories, and you can pick and choose whatever participation you'd like to do. Now,
if you can't do any walking yourself, you could also still make donations, right? Can you make one donation to the event itself? Do you have to pick one of the 11 groups? How does that work?
If you go to the murrayhousingwalk.org website and make a donation, that'll be shared with all the groups.
You can also make donations to an individual group if there's a particular group or groups that you feel particularly passionate about. I
know that all of you knew Bob as you're getting ready for the walk and just thinking about kind of channeling him. Don, I'll start with you. What are some of your thoughts of what are you going to be thinking when you're out there this year?
The thing that people ask me this a lot, and the thing that people need to understand that are listening to the radio, these people that need our help are all around us. They're driving our school buses. They're waiting on tables. They're taking care of the landscaping. They're taking care of our elderly relatives in nursing homes. They're working hard. But as Caroline said, the wages don't go far enough. And you'll end up with two parents both working full-time, barely able to keep a roof over the family's heads, and they deserve some help. They're doing the work, and they're almost there, but they need some help. And I think that we just need to understand that these folks that need our help are all around us. And here on the Cape, some of us are lucky enough to be here. We need to think about that, and that's what's in my mind.
They are your friends and your neighbors. Quick last thought, Tom?
Bob used to do this walk, and people would ask him why he would do all the way from Provincetown to Falmouth, and he would say and why would you do it in the middle of July at the busiest and hottest time of the year? And he would say it's because the uncomfort that the discomfort that I feel is nothing compared to the discomfort of homelessness. Right. And I think that's a really valid and clear representation of why Bob created this walk and why he felt so passionate about what he did.
Caroline, kind of final thoughts?
My final thought would be for all the homeless people out there, but people like Bob Murray. There's a lot of people like Bob Murray floating around Barnstable and Hyannis, and I've had the opportunity to meet them, and they would kill me if I listed off their names. But I'm very grateful for all those people. So
one thing Bob I used to say about Bob is Bob didn't just talk the talk, he walked the walk literally. So, All right, it's murrayhousingwalk.org, begins on Monday. We'll be giving you updates here throughout the week, and we'd like to thank all three of you for coming in and joining us, Caroline, Tom, and Don. Thanks so much. We'll see you guys out there on the walk over the next couple of days.
And Matt, just personal thank you for all the support you've given to this walk over the years.
Our pleasure. Thanks for being with us today on this edition of the Sunday Journal. I'm your host, Matt Pitto.
This podcast is a presentation of Cape Cod Broadcasting, which is solely responsible for its content. Thank you for listening. For more information, please visit us at capecodbroadcasting.com.